This is part two of lecture three, and I just wanted to say a few words about observation and transcription. This week, you are collecting your data, so you will observe or record, observe and record a social event or interaction or a series of interactions. So, one thing I wanted to mention is if you are observing and taking notes, make sure that your notes are systematic, which means that you pay attention to typical repeated things, you pay attention to patterns, and you do not just focus on different things that stand out about each encounter because it would be very difficult to compare. And if you remember, Silverman tells us to sort of resist the impulses to tell a good story or to focus on the remarkable. So basically, um, we have to be a little bit boring, maybe, and really anal and just pay attention to all the little details and sort of the same types of details about each encounter that we observe. If you're recording, make sure that you have one or two recording devices, and because the biggest problem usually is the quality of sound, so make sure that you will be able to hear what you've recorded. So usually recording in public places is pretty difficult, so you might want to practice recording first and see if the sound is okay. You must ask people who are around you if they can be recorded. It is actually illegal in Massachusetts, I think, to surreptitiously record people. So this is important. If you're recording, you might want to maybe try a few times because people might act differently and react to the um, audio recorder or your phone. Actual phones could work really well because people might react less to them, even if they know that it is recording. But people might say something, make jokes, just act very differently from what they normally do. But then they will always inevitably forget and sort of act more normally. So you should think about that. And now a little bit about transcription. And this is also important because there is a question on the quiz. So here's a little introduction of what transcription is and why it matters. So first of all, it is a stage of social scientific analysis. Transcription is analytical because it is always selective. We select which features of talk to highlight, and we always lose some information and we always emphasize some information. So any transcription is a simplified abstraction from a complex communicative phenomenon which we have observed and recorded. And so we as researchers must approach this process of transcription consciously and know uh, which features we are highlighting and why. So if you have a recording and, for example, you work on a few different projects, for each project you will make a different transcript, and you will always work with, you will always go back to the recording and you will always work with the recording, not with the transcript, because A, you might hear something new, you might want to edit your transcript. B, to keep your transcript readable, you might want to, um, kind of delete some of the information, take out some of the information as you add other information into your transcript. So, for example, if one project focuses a lot on the nonverbal behaviors, you might want to add a lot of comments about, nonverbal actions and gestures. and whether people are facing each other, whether they're making eye contact, things like that. And for a different project, you might want to focus more on the changes in tone and pitch and pauses and um, overlaps and things like that, and maybe on people's pronunciation, right? So you can actually spell words the way that people say them rather than follow correct spelling. And this might be relevant, especially if you have people with different backgrounds who have different accents and they talk to each other. Um, Maybe they react to the difference in accents, and then it matters, and then you have to add that, especially if this is something that you might be interested in talking about in your analysis. So think about that. Keep your transcript focused. Um, on the things that you're most interested in, yet readable. Remember that it's never final, and remember that we have to be conscious about what we're choosing to add to the transcript in addition to just the words that people say. And once you complete your transcription, you will see that it is much easier to analyze talk this way when you have it in front of you and when you can see the pauses, when you can see the overlaps. Um, and then it's much easier to analyze style the way that Tannen does, for example, right? Who talks about shifts between topics and turn-taking patterns and interruptions and overlaps and changes in tone and volume, right? So first you have to add them into your transcript, and then you will see the patterns. It will be much easier. Um, yes, so this is what I wanted to say. And so this, for example, is a transcript that I've used also for teaching. And so we will look at it next week as well. So you can see, for example, here, the lack of pauses between turns in lines 6 and 7, the equation signs. You can see a lot of emphasis because I thought that kind of the intonation patterns were kind of interesting. People emphasize certain words, and I marked that. Here in lines 28, 29, you can see an overlap when they talk over each other. And you can see a lot of long vowels, which are marked with semicolons. And the transcript is done in a table, which you don't have to do, but you could choose to do that because it might be easier to work with line numbers. It has line numbers, which will help you a lot in writing your analysis because it will be very easy to refer to the transcript, and you can see that each person's name is identified, so you can see easily who says what. And since you are recording and transcribing real-life interactions, you have to hide the identity of the people you recorded, so you give them pseudonyms or just mark them as A, B, C, but I feel like giving them alternative names is more fun, so you could do that. And so you have this file, the transcription glossary, in week 3 folder, which will teach you the signs. The assignment sheet tells you what are the necessary elements, the mandatory elements of the transcript, and then you can also choose to use other ones if you think that they're important. For example, you can hear distinctly that a person just speeds up at a certain point. You might want to mark that with these arrows, right, that show you how you slow down or you speed up. Comments and nonverbal behaviors can be in double brackets, etc. So you could use those if you wanted. And the last thing I wanted to say is that there is a um, free software called Audacity that you can download from the internet. You could use that. It might help you um, like calculate the length of the pauses, um, and kind of break down the long recording into smaller parts. So you might want to use it, but you don't have to. And that's it. Thank you.